Hi, Zizaran here with another video, and this time we're going to be talking about the logout macro. Currently, due to a challenge, me, Mathil, Quinn, Steel Mage, and a few others joined in, decided that as long as Mathil plays hardcore, we are all going to not log out. So, not just like logging out with a macro, but just no logging out at all. And this has caused a lot of people and some threads and stuff, for example, on Reddit, on the forums, to be like very, very toxic. And I think a lot of it is just not knowing the balance and the history around the logout macro and just the player's ability to log out in general. I wanted to make a video talking about it, just saying some facts. In my opinion, and the reason that I personally never shit on somebody playing softcore or just the game in any way they want to enjoy it is this is a game. The only way to play the game wrong is to not have fun. As long as you're not violating the terms of service, you are good. We are all playing the same game. We're all just trying to have fun in our own way. That's like the bottom line. So let's start off with an important thing, number one. The game is actually balanced around it. This isn't something streamers have made up. This isn't something we just think is the case. It's not that Path of Exile can't change this or can't force us not to log out. Is that it's a solution to a problem that they have decided to bounce around and make decisions on. And I'll try to explain this as best as I can. So the problem is that, first of all, people's computers aren't stable, people's connections aren't stable, and the servers aren't stable. So that is like the number one problem. And then you have a couple of different ways to deal with that. So first we can look at like the Diablo way of dealing with that. The Diablo way is that you have the cheat death mechanic, which is when your character drops to 0, you either like gain a small amount of life or full amount of life, and you have another chance, and that skill has a cooldown. When I played Diablo, I found it almost impossible to die, and I actively had to try to fully die, because you have 2 of these cheat deaths. So personally, I'm not a huge fan of that mechanic. Now in Path of Exile, you have that your character, for the most part, should disappear when your connection drops. You aren't like kept in the game for 10 seconds, which is something they could do, obviously, if they wanted to. And we'll show some videos about developers talking about this. And instead, they have made balance changes around this. Now, obviously, Path of Exile, especially 5 years ago, used to be way more necessary to be able to log out instantly. It's a lot less necessary now. That's why you'll also see less people doing it than before. Because before, it could happen very, very often that your character would rubber band, which means that you weren't where you thought you were, and suddenly you just saw yourself taking damage even if the screen was clear. You would then log out to prevent yourself from dying. Now that's no longer the case. The game's pretty stable now, but they are still balancing around it. So first, let's watch a little clip of Chris Wilson in 2018 on a podcast with myself talking about the logout macro. Say your character's about to die, but you know you can save it by logging out.
So the answer is yes, but this league I haven't needed to yet, and that's partly because I'm playing an insanely tanky character where, you know, if I'm finding there's spikes of damage, then I can politely walk away and open a portal. But I absolutely will log out if I see my life drop to 30%. It's just that hasn't happened so far this league. And this is an intentional thing where there are 2 ways you can balance the game. The first way is where you actually get damage swings that are meaningful, and in that case you could be killed in a couple of seconds, and so logging out is a way of avoiding that. Or you can say, look guys, logging out's cheesy, so we're adding like a 5-second period where if you try to log out, you're still in the game while taking damage for 5 seconds. And the game would be 100% different end to end if that was the case. Like that will never happen to Path of Exile because of the amount of work required. It would mean so much of a rebalance. We'd be sent back to the Dark Ages, and you know, the entire hardcore community who may be complaining about logouts would still quit when that change is made. So anyway, it is very, like, put it this way. I was playing recently when I was getting rolling power outages at my house, right? Like there was some bad storm despite it being summer. And I really wanted to hit 88, like I was, 6% away from the level. So I have to gain 6% of the X, knowing that 5 times in the last hour my power has gone out. When the power goes out, I'm going to be in game for 6 seconds, exposed to whatever I'm fighting, right? So I'm trying to level a map knowing that I have to tank 6 seconds of not being able to actively leech or cast Enduring Cry or anything in order to get out of combat. And that was a crazy experience. I had to be so careful, and I went on low tier maps and they were dangerous, so I abandoned 5 or 6 maps, and I eventually got the experience And it took like several hours, and there weren't any power outages during that time, but it was a horrific, scary experience. And every moment of Path of Exile would be like that if, upon being disconnected and choosing to log out, like there's nothing you can do about it, you're taking 5 or 6 seconds of damage.
Right.
Means that you will lose characters in a way that just feels unfair. And so, anyway, enough ranting. Logouts is a part of the way the game works, and it's easy to do. You press Alt F4, or you exit a character screen, or whatever your preferred method is.
And obviously a lot of people are, whether they like it or not, a lot of people don't like the logout macro. Is that something you've thought about putting in the game?
I kind of think it would be fine to have a key you can press that does everything that one of their macros does. I mean, it's not hard to add necessarily. So sure, it's kind of one of those things that we probably should do in the future, but haven't yet got around to it because it means distracting people from useful stuff they're doing.
So again, I just wanted to show that because with the way people were talking about it on Reddit, this was just something GGG were unable to do something about, or they were forced to let people play like this, when this is intentional design to deal with that problem. So I think that was very, very important to talk about and show people, because I remember when I started playing Path of Exile, I felt like logging out was cheating. After like hearing and seeing posts from developers saying it's an intended way to play and to deal with problems, obviously I changed my mind on it, because the way I now look at the logout macro is the same as the life flask. It's an intended game mechanic, and I definitely prefer this solution to the problem to the Diablo 3 cheat death. The important part here is that the game is balanced around it, and there are a lot of good things about that as well. It allows you to go a little bit faster, and you're able to react to things. So for example, you're able to open a strongbox that might have freeze immunity and not necessarily care if your freeze fast is down. You can then use your logout macro as a skill shot, and you're punished by like having to walk back. I definitely prefer, I've played with the logout macro and I've played without it, and I have a lot more fun playing with it. A lot of people will be like, doesn't this defeat the purpose of hardcore though? Playing with a logout macro, because then you can never die. So there are quite a lot of people from the posts that seem to think this is an automatic thing, that when you get below 10 or 20% HP, it logs you out and you can never die. This is obviously not the case. Then my RIP playlist wouldn't be as full as it is. And the way the logout macro works is the same as Alt F4ing, except you don't have to press 2 buttons, you press 1. It's a reaction that you as the player makes, and often you have to make it very quickly. There are also some arenas, which this I always thought was weird. They're fine with logging out, but obviously there will always be some people that would rather do everything in-game, so portal out, but there are some fights in the game that you cannot portal out of. You literally have to log out to avoid them. Maybe this is because they don't want people to cheese it with putting portals in an optimal position and using the invulnerability window, but I always thought that was very weird. So for like the Maven fights, the Maven herself, Uber Elder, and all of these, you cannot open a portal at all. You have to log out. Obviously, this is why the game is balanced the way it is, with like there is a large amount of one-shots, there's a large amount of things that will still get you. I would say I definitely would have wanted to log out more this league. Part of that is because I'm playing a totem build, so I have like not very high regen with the way I've built. I don't have very high leech, and honestly, I picked a bad build for the logout challenge. Now that I'm playing Spectral Shield Throw with Fortify and defenses, and a very, very tanky character with instant leech and the instant ability to kill things, I haven't had like even a need for a logout, right? So it limits a lot of builds. It opens up more by build diversity on hardcore, which obviously always has less build diversity than softcore. If you really want to play a lot of different builds, softcore is the optimal place to be. But yeah, one-shots and stuff is balanced around this, and I could see people not being happy with that. I could see that people would rather have the game be slower and not one-shots. But from what GGG have been saying, this isn't something they want to change. And I do think that most people would rather have like new good leagues and stuff, because it sounds from what they were saying that it would be a large rebalance, right? And they don't want to take people away from working on other aspects of the game just to potentially get rid of the logout macro or being able to log out. The main things people use to avoid logout macros is to get out of fights with no portals. It's to avoid degens like poison or bleed. And obviously these are a lot more dangerous now. Last league, I didn't really log out very much because obviously we were so strong with our like permanent immunity from flasks. Poison wasn't as strong from monsters. Bleed immunity was very easy. So last league, there wasn't that much to log out. This league, it's definitely more dangerous because of the way immunities have been changed and stuff. The main point is logging out is a part of the game. The developers think it's a part of the game. So if you don't like it, that's completely okay. But please don't shit on players that are playing the game the intended way to play. Because at the end of the day, people aren't breaking the terms of service. They're having fun. And it's likely not going to change. So I just wanted to make this video and explain things because I've always hated the hardcore versus softcore superiority one way or another. I've never been a fan, and it used to be very different. It used to be players would be embarrassed to admit they were playing softcore. This is in like 2013 to 2015, and people playing back then would, even though it was still a large chunk of the player base played softcore, around like 50 to 70%, because of some streamers and stuff like that, there was so much hardcore superiority, and people were shitting on softcore players so hard because it was like pussy core or scrub core. And I was never a big fan of that. It's a fucking video game. Who would ever play a video game to feel superior over others? Like, it's very strange to me. I don't play hardcore to make like feel that I'm better than other people. I play hardcore because I generally like the risk and the thrill of dying. And I still very much have that, even if I have the ability to log out. And now in turn, now it's changed. Now it's a lot more people going like LOL logout core and stuff like that. And I think that's unfortunate because there's never a benefit for added toxicity in the game. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Just wanted to say my piece and hope people can be nicer to each other when there's no reason to be toxic. It's been a shitty 2 years to begin with. Just be nicer to each other. Hope you guys liked the video. Would love to hear what you guys think. But more importantly, try to die less than I do. So if you liked the video.